Good morning. Welcome everybody to Demystifying AI for Business. This session is part of the 4th Annual Rising Economy Conference, hosted by South Island Prosperity Partnership. My name is Serge Borage, and now it's time for my shameless plug. I'm the president of Advanced Solutions, a DXC technology company. DXC Technology is a global technology firm. We have over 60 years of innovating the technology sector worldwide. DXC was formed with the merger of two technology powerhouses that you might be aware of, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and Computer Sciences Corporation. At DXC Technology, we help global companies run their mission-critical systems and their operations while modernizing IT, optimizing data architecture, and ensuring security and scalability across public, private, and hybrid clouds. At Advanced Solutions, we are a subsidiary of DXC Technology located right here in Victoria, and we're built to serve the unique needs of the BC public sector, spanning modern application development, IT infrastructure hosting, and modern workplace services. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize that today's International Women's Day. And as I was reflecting about Advanced Solutions' commitment to diversity and equality, I thought it'd be worth noting that our executive team is made up of 50% women, and our board of directors is made up of 75% women, with expertise spanning application management and delivery, business and account management, finance, and human resources. In a moment, I'm going to turn things over to our speakers, but first, a quick overview of the format. About halfway through the conversation, we'll be taking your questions for our speakers. You can submit a question at any time through the Zoom Q&A below this video. The session is being recorded, and you can submit your questions anonymously if you prefer. To interact with attendees, you can use the Zoom chat or the Whova chat. The production team will monitor the Whova chat and the Q&A for those joining us through the app. And finally, if you're posting takeaways on social media, please use the hashtag Rising Economy Week 2024. Our moderator today is Junaid Ahmad, Special Projects Lead for VIATEC. Junaid has a solid background in AI and software engineering, with a career that spans from initiating his own startup, Jackrabbit Ops, and leading a pharmaceutical robotics company to achieve over $10 million in annual recurring revenue. With more than 7 years in the field, his expertise not only covers starting and scaling tech ventures, but also applying AI to streamline operations and drive innovation. Junaid is instrumental in uniting Victoria's tech community as VIATEC aims to reach a collective goal of $10 billion by 2030. His unique blend of entrepreneurial spirit and technical acumen subtly positions him as a key voice in the discussion of the future of AI. Welcome, Junaid.
Thanks for the intro. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited for this session and getting everybody really valuable information as we delve into demystifying AI and making it accessible for the businesses out here in the Pacific West Coast. We actually have a really good group of people here together to facilitate that conversation and bring you those insights for people that will give you information that you can start acting on right off the bat. I'm not a big fan of super long intros, but I'm just going to highlight them and then we'll break into our icebreakers so you can get them to know them a little bit more. We have Linke, the CEO of Amii, joining us from Edmonton, Noureen, Syed from IBM Consulting, Rogayeh Tabrizi, who's joining us from Vancouver of Theory and Practice, and Marc Lowe from KPMG. If you guys want to join us, and I will share my first question. I guess, is everybody here? Yep, everybody's here. Okay, sweet. If you guys want to unmute, we'll start. Whoever wants to take the question first, I'm guessing the order is different on everybody's screen, but when you look at your career, can you speak a little bit about what AI has enhanced your career in, and what did you want to be when you were 8 years old? Cam, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity. This is exciting. I think I probably wanted to be like an astronaut or something when I was 8. Although I always remember being fascinated with robots growing up. So I guess I kind of ended up, my 8-year-old self might be at least some semi-happy, although probably thought there was going to be more exciting robots. Yeah, so I run Artificial Intelligence Institute based in Edmonton. We have researchers at our core partner at the University of Alberta, but then researchers across Western Canada, a number of them in BC. And so, yeah, I mean, AI is obviously a pretty big part of our life, running AI Research Institute. I think the really big thing we've seen, the kind of change in over the last 5 years is just how eager businesses to start to use AI. There's still some we don't know maybe where to get started at times, but that interest level is certainly there. And I think the level over the last 5 years of the real business value that can be gained from AI is really interesting. And so that's kind of had a lot of impact on us and on me as we're driving forward things on the research side, really that translational piece into industry. So that's been I think the big impact over the last 5 years here.
Nice.
I can jump in that one.
Yeah.
Hi, Marc from KPMG. I lead a group called Ignition, which is our innovation and emerging tech group. How AI has changed my career, I think, it's just been this really interesting experience of living through, feels like it's living through history. So, in a really, truly transformational period in technology's evolution, and especially in the last, sort of 14, 16 months, as generative AI has burst on the scene, and all of a sudden it's on the tip of everyone's tongue because it's so accessible, and so all areas of business are looking at it. I had the good fortune of working with some incredibly smart AI developers and the folks who build the models and all that kind of stuff, and that's already been this amazing journey. But of course, now we're unlocking this whole new chapter. So it really has been this sort of step change in terms of as Cam's describing, right? Similarly, where all of a sudden it's the competition is so much more prevalent and accelerating so much faster. What did I want to be when I was 8? Well, as the son of immigrants to Canada in the 80s, I wanted to be a professional hockey player. My childhood memories were all of sitting next to my dad watching Hockey Night in Canada and dreaming of being. It wasn't even Wayne Gretzky. It was my dad was a fan of Guy Lafleur, and so these will be names that will date me terribly. But yeah, but that was my dream, was to be a hockey player. So I'm a long ways from that, but still having a lot of fun.
Thanks for sharing.
Awesome, thank you. I'll go next. Thank you to Horizon Economy and Junaid for having me here today. I'm Noureen Syed. I lead the Microsoft practice in IBM Consulting, and on a day-to-day, I work with clients and enterprises across industries to really help them on their transformation utilizing data and AI technology stacks. I think similar to what Cam and Marc have mentioned, the major part of how data and AI, or just in broader AI, has transformed my career is a bit of productivity personally. I'd say it actually makes a difference in the day-to-day, and we'll get into some of those examples. And quite surprisingly, it's buzzy now because of generative AI in the last 2 years, but AI has been there from the moment you started using a calculator probably to do math, right? It's really any augmentation and automation that we as humans have been facing. And then I'd say the bigger transformational journey that I'm kind of proud of within the teams that I work with and is really kind of seeing a client come to us. Sometimes they have a problem, sometimes we have a challenge on things they're not considering, and really taking that and using data and AI to then do something end to end and leave them with an outcome that they can drive business value and end user experiences, customers, that really puts a bow on it, if you will, for me, right? And that any day we close a project is like that full gratification coming into play. My 80-year-old self wanted to be a race car driver. I didn't end up there, although I do drive my car really fast, and I'm in tech, I guess. So fast is the name of every day.
All right, I guess I go next. My name is Rogayeh Tabrizi. Thank you so much for having me. I run theory and practice. TAP is an AI product company with a twist, and that twist is behavioral economics. We have been pairing behavioral economics with AI to help large enterprises put their data to work. by training, I am a physicist and an economist. So the company was built very much at that intersection as well. I studied particle physics, and I was lucky enough to work at CERN in just waking up to 20 terabytes of data, but then turning economist and becoming a game theorist who really studies why people do what they do the way they do it. That's, I think, like the magic behind the madness here. And just sitting at that intersection really allows you to look at questions very differently, because it's not just about AI, and it's not just about data and the models and sophistication of algorithms that we can build. It's also actually about asking the right questions and being able to connect both of these two worlds together. It's been incredible to run the company for the last 6 years. We've been lucky to work with Fortune 100 companies such as Walmart, Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, so big data and, having access to all of that data that frankly I would have paid for to get access during my PhD, but also really getting exposure to the type of challenges and complex problems that the business leaders are dealing with. That has been the thing that has been the key to our success. My 8-year-old self wanted to be a physicist. So I think I became a physicist. I was very much a theorist. I got started in the string theory. And from there, I decided to do something a little bit more practical, and particle physics was more practical than a string theory. So here I am. I think my 8-year-old self will be proud that I followed the dream.
I would have loved to meet your 8-year-old self talking about physics. That would have been very interesting. All right, so we're here.
Stories.
Yeah, so we're here to help demystify AI for a lot of people. And so I want to make this as useful and practical for people. So I'm going to start with a very insightful first question. As people are looking at their businesses, what do you feel like is step one of implementing AI into their businesses?
I'll jump in first because, I just said the piece about asking the right questions. I think there is a lot of buzz right now in industry, especially around, Chat GPT and, the introduction of that in the last year or so. But I think, one thing that is going to be super important for businesses not to lose sight of is, as we are embarking and really trying to build a roadmap, before it was about data roadmap, it was about, ML roadmap and all those sort of things. And now it's like the AI roadmap. As we're embarking on that journey, I think it is incredibly important to really go back to the essential and to the first principles of asking ourselves, why do we believe the question that we think this new technology can actually answer is the right question to begin with? Have we truly understood and backward engineered the ROI? Have we asked ourselves challenges around the adoption of this new technology? Because one thing is to just have a POC and just create some buzz around it. But in order to actually scale it inside the organization, there are more steps and more hard thinking, deep thinking that is required. So, I'll just maybe ground the conversation in that.
Yeah, like almost saying step 0 might be the better point to start at than step 1. Yeah. Have you guys noticed that those trends in especially the clients IBM or Microsoft is taking, have you noticed that they're not asking those questions prior to adopting AI, Noureen?
Junaid, I'd say it's actually very similar, but sometimes they want to start off with a use case to just kind of get to ease the tension, if you will, but to kind of capture what Rogayeh put very beautifully, we do recommend a step 1 is have a vision and a strategy. So we can absolutely work with you on a pilot or prototype, proof of concept, but you want to ask yourself, what is AI going to bring to my company? Is it going to be an enterprise-wide approach? And then AI in general is a spectrum, like generative AI is the last little bit, but there is automation, which is a lighter form of AI that you can kind of bring as well to your organization. And the reason you want to set that stage is anytime that new use case or someone says, can we do this AI thing? You want to have a mechanism to ground how you're going to spend money, prioritize resources. So if it aligns with the vision of, well, it's got to give back to my operating expenses, or it's going to actually drive revenue, or it's going to increase customer experience. So you just want to have, that's too many things to tackle. Like if someone had all of that in their AI strategy, I'd say that's too wide, narrow it. And I'd also encourage businesses of any size can do this, right? This is not just, oh, we have a strategy and vision. If we're a big enterprise, you can have this as, any size of business.
Yeah, like I think really questioning like having a strategic play around it might be the move. Is KPMG or like plays in, like, I'm curious if the like adoption ideas around enterprise and like smaller businesses are about the same, or like should the two levels be considering them differently?
Considering them a little bit differently from the perspective of cost and complexity, I think. So Noureen's, well, both my colleagues on the panel here have made fantastic points to start, right? I think the first question is understanding why you want to do it. So being very clear at a board and C-suite level about what does this mean. And then, the other piece is of course like this kind of bottom up piece where we're kind of living in this, it's the next era of bring your own device, right? So all your employees are interacting with this. So thinking through very carefully, right? What does that mean in terms of how you enable it and enable it safely? There's a big difference in terms of a large enterprise and the complexity of the organization and the infrastructure that they have and the number of use cases they're going to go and kind of hunt for. So that informs how much you want to spend on infrastructure to enable these multitude of use cases. For smaller organizations, luckily now the technology is so accessible, so there's that space is moving very quickly, and even the brands that we're kind of all familiar with, right, the OpenAIs of the world are going to be developing really off-the-shelf enterprise level solutions that for a lot of the majority of small businesses are going to be like good enough in terms of the trade-offs that you would have to make there. So the cost considerations and the complexities are really where the two differentiate. But again, I would say, the fact that tools are so accessible, you're seeing this kind of, top-down view of from leadership going like the thesis is it's going to change the nature of how business gets done. So what does that mean? And what are the sort of, second and third order implications of that? And then in the same breath, right? Employees going, hey, I'm experimenting. I'm using it. We have these conversations all the time, talking with a client, say, oh, well, somebody in a department over there is using it to draft their emails, and like, okay, well, what tool are they using? Oh, they're using ChatGPT, and they're like, just off the shelf ChatGPT, like regular access. Like, yeah, okay, we should probably hang on a second. Let's address what's happening there, right, and what the implications are. So again, it's good news, but needs to be very thoughtfully addressed.
How do you feel like companies can address those things though? Like, should they be putting policies in place? Should they be having company-wide meetings to like get an understanding amongst everyone? Like, what's the best means of mitigating those risks and security concerns?
Well, it's certainly, there are two parallel tracks. One is around developing governance and being thoughtful about that. So, what tools are you enabling? What are the security considerations around that? What are the risks? How do you mitigate them? So being very, very thoughtful as an organization about, what are the boundaries that you want to enable your staff to play with? And the second thing is actually enabling them to do it. And this is the hard part for organizations. I think that's the tension, is there's almost like an implied spend or impetus here because employees are accessing these tools. And I don't, what we caution organizations not to do is to act in this way where you're sort of firewalling stuff. Because part of this story is going to become, we believe that employees are going to demand it. In the same way that I want to be able to, bring my iPhone and access the network and so on, the organizations are going to be really driven by employees to be enabling these tools. So the second part of the conversation is, how do you do that in a way that's safe? And there are playbooks around this. It's not even in the short time that we've been working with these more sort of broader enterprise tools, we've already established, there's methodology in terms of how you do that, but you have to get in the conversation. So it's not something that you can unfortunately be a bystander around and just wait to see what happens, because that does expose you to all kinds of unforeseen risks.
Yeah, I like, from the conversations I've had with tech members of Victoria, I've noticed this, like, they would like to jump into the AI space, but they're looking for like a helping hand or someone to walk them through it. And you guys have like a lot of experience. Like, Rogayeh, you like have worked with like Fortune 100 companies to like get them on board with 100, and you're almost, you get them on board with AI. And like, you've done that for them. So like, what would you say to like the smaller non-Fortune 100 companies as they're exploring that and like looking for someone like yourself to help guide them as they explore these like questions about AI and implementing AI?
Yeah, thanks, Junaid. It's interesting, Mark. I totally agree with your comments on governance and figuring out some of the basics. Some basic considerations has to be in place in advance. But oftentimes, I mean, you'll be surprised. Some of the very, very big organizations that we work with, they're not necessarily have the readiness. So I want to put it out there that like being a smaller organization or a mid-sized company versus a big enterprise, it doesn't necessarily mean that the journey is actually very different. So let's assume some of the basics are in place. Let's just start from a little bit of a different place. Number one question that I get is that, do we have enough data? And it's just like phobia. It literally doesn't matter. You're talking with Fortune 1 company or, like with Fortune 2000 company. Always there is this consideration, or is the data that we have enough? And, one of the things that I realized was that, and the reason I go back always to asking the right question is that, well, enough for what exactly? What are the questions again that we are trying to answer? Sometimes 1 or 2 data sets are going to be enough. Sometimes you would need 80 different data sets to come together, and you need a proper enterprise tool or an environment to manage that, right? So again, being able to start with the right questions, build the right use cases, and actually, I guess what I'm trying to say is appreciate the ecosystem. A question does not exist in vacuum. A use case doesn't exist in vacuum. Let me give you a tangible example. We would work with a retailer and they would ask us, we really need to understand our customers. Well, you're a big retailer, you're a billion-dollar company, you've done clearly something right. What is it that you think you're not understanding about your customers? Oh, we think we have a branding problem. Well, tell me a little bit more. Why do you think you have a branding problem? 3 questions down the road, it has nothing to do with branding, nothing to do with understanding members. It's a pricing question. It's a discount shopping behavior. You have trained most of your loyal members to wait to receive a call from somebody at the store to tell them that there's a discount coming on. So sure, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. So yeah, I agree. Let's start with understanding your customers and your members, but knowing that the question that we really want to understand is what is it that drives a particular behavior? And that particular behavior in this example is discount shopping behavior. So when you distill the question that much, it actually gives you a roadmap to the kind of data that you need. I call that minimum viable data. We've developed, I came up with this language, I just call it MVD. Same way that we talk about minimum viable products, what is your minimum viable data? Because minimum viable data does not need to be a terabyte. Minimum viable data sometimes requires 5,000 members and, but the right information about those customers or those members. So being able to identify what is the minimum viable data that actually going to have signals for the kind of questions that you want to either come up with truly descriptive approach or a predictive approach. These are some of the things that we start from. And, I'll be very interested, Marc, in your thoughts, coming from Amii and the kind of research that you guys do there. But when we talk about AI, let's really break that down as well. Machine learning algorithms, we have, just like generative AI is just one of the class of algorithms that exists. It does not, this big umbrella that we use AI. Oftentimes you don't even need it. You don't even need to get that fancy. Like sometimes neural nets are going to do the job. Sometimes an XGBoost is going to do a job. Sometimes, so knowing what is your minimum viable data, what are the minimum viable models that are going to help you at least get directional signals to solving the problems. And then from there, to me, the most important step is actually the step after you have generated outcomes based on the minimum viable data and minimum viable models. You have to go back and experiment. If you do not experiment, there is zero way of truly establishing the ROI and the impact that entire effort generated for you. And I think that's the part that's oftentimes overlooked.
Yeah, I hope you trademark and patent minimum viable data. I think it's a really good
I
way
should.
of putting it. Yeah. When you speak about that, does AI become the medium by running those experiments to make sure the data is there, just so our audience has a good clarity on what they should, how do they validate if that data is good enough?
Yeah, no, it's a very, very good question. And there are multiple different steps to validation. One step is validating that you truly have the proper data. Then there are methodologies to validate the models. And after that, it's about validating whether the outcome that you generated actually also going to truly solve the problem. You know, let me play with the same example that I started with. So let's say you want to tackle discount shopping behavior because that's something that you believe is not necessarily impacting your brand positively. So let's say through a whole bunch of behavioral segmentations and different kind of propensity models, we identified groups of people that are discount shoppers. But remember, it's a model, right? So, you know, I remember working with an organization and they were like, okay, like maybe for our discount shoppers, we can give some sort of discount or we can do something. And I was like, well, why? Like, do you actually know why they are waiting for that discount? Or return is another example. A lot of people, you know, a lot of retailers have challenges around return. So, you know, the question is like, what can I do to stop a particular behavior or discourage a particular behavior? And then they come up with some examples. Maybe I give a discount, 10% discount to whoever, which I think has higher probability of returning an item. And then I would make it a final sale. On the surface, it feels like a good strategy, right? You stop a sale, but it is a model. It's going to have false positives and false negatives. So be very careful, because if you end up giving a blanket discount 10% to people who have, let's say, over 75% probability of returning an item, you might be losing money. Whereas understanding, well, maybe it is a high threshold for free shipping that we have, that somebody is putting one extra item in a basket in order to, you know, just hit that threshold. There are other, all I'm trying to say is that we have to build hypotheses around some of the things that we think are driving behaviors, and then go and, based on the results of our models, run very targeted experiments, let's say, and then see what we are learning from those experiments. Sometimes it's about nudging toward a particular behavior. Sometimes it's about discouraging a particular behavior, etc.
Yeah. Cam, are you seeing similar trends in the research you guys are conducting, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure about similar trends. I think you know, what everybody's probably seeing is there's a base level of literacy, of AI literacy, that execs and boards are struggling with. It's something that we hear a lot. We launched a specific exec summit around that, because that piece around governance, that piece around being able to have a framework for your organization, to empower your organization to go, is really tough when you're talking about something that, you know, at a board or at executive level you don't understand. So usually we're seeing that as a first pass there, as a really important piece. And then the second part, and you know, maybe I'll agree and then maybe a slight disagree on the minimum viable data piece. I'm on a slight rant about us everybody talking about data like too much right now. And I actually think we need to, as a board exec, for a business, your like first pass should be talking about the outcome that you are trying to get to, and talking, and this isn't mine, I heard it somewhere else, so I can't remember where, about minimum viable prediction. So like, what's the like level of prediction you need to achieve? And that's going to change outcome to outcome and business to business. And then that's going to get you to where your minimum viable data is to be able to get there. So this is where I do agree, you end up getting there. But that piece on the prediction side, you know, it's kind of easy to say, well, if you could predict something perfectly, well, that's, yeah, great. But that's not usually how any of this stuff comes in. You know, you might have a health thing where if you can, you know, move something from a 30% prediction to a 40% prediction, you have an enormous impact on the healthcare system. Whereas if you're doing something around, you know, maybe customer churn, you know, a 10% increase, you know, 40%, you know, accurate prediction might be terrible, and you're never deploying that. And you might say, you know, we need to get to 90-95%. And then here's a really big impact that we get to have there. So I think that's the kind of first pass, because at the end of the day, like machine learning, AI, like these are all just predictive technologies. You know, whether you're using a generative AI that it's just predicting what text you wanted to see based on what you typed in, whether it's, you know, you're using it to try and predict when your machines need to be fixed, predicting, you know, probability of a heart attack for a patient. These are all like machine learning is a predictive technology. So if you can start with it with literacy, then the outcomes that you want, then the kind of prediction levels to be able to have an impact there that would drive business value, then you can get into data and be able to start to have that in your organization overall. So that's a big thing that we've seen. It's funny because as a research group, I don't think I really talked about one part of what we do is research. I didn't talk about specific technologies very much, but those are all kind of afterthoughts once you go through that process, as a business, then looking at what the right technology for what you're trying to do is, and whether it's something that exists already or something that you want to be you need to be on the cutting edge in order to get that prediction or have that impact that you need to have in what you're doing.
May I jump in on this conversation? Because I love these discussions. It's awesome with some fantastic points. To me, the piece that is really being highlighted is the need to pair the technology, which is amazing and super powerful, with a level of human insight that puts it in context, right? Both in terms of the question you're trying to get to, which Rogayeh is brilliantly articulating there, right? Is make sure you're asking the right question before you begin. And then pairing the output with a bit of human intuition to understand whether it's contextual and relevant. So give you a very practical example. One of the organizations that we're working with in higher education is looking at student churn, right? So there are markers of potential churn based on behavior. So you can build models that say, hey, this student is exhibiting particular types of behavior. That puts them at risk. There's obvious implications from a revenue perspective from the institution and the personal on a personal level for the student. Okay, great. You can build the model. Fantastic. Now you got to pair that with a human intervention on the back end that says, great, how do I meet that person where they are and validate whether the model is giving me something useful as an output or not, right? And so that's where these things become very, very powerful. Like what Cam's articulating there, right, is this kind of idea that the technology is going to allow us to fully automate everything, automate our interactions in this seamless ways. Not likely to happen, and in fact, very, very important to then be applying our kind of human contextual abilities on top of those outputs, I think, to really drive value. And then those signals become very, very useful, and you can intervene in meaningful ways.
I was going to ask Cam, where was the disagreement? All I heard was agreement. Maybe it is my confirmation bias.
No, we totally agree on it. I think we totally agree.
Great.
Yeah, I'm like looking at the demystification, and how in Scooby-Doo they take the mask off the ghost and there's a person inside, and I'm seeing it as AI's the get up that the person has on. When you take it off, they just an understanding of, hey, this is a predictive model that you're looking at underneath, and it's only going to work off of the questions that you ask and if they're the right questions or not. And I think we just put in this cover of ChatGPT and AI, and that's all we're seeing from a surface level.
Yeah, I think one piece that I wanted to go back to, and Marc, what you talked about, the example of the students is just brilliant. That's why I kept going back to experiments. I think, on one level, we are talking about people understanding the basics of AI, because the more we learn about it, actually, the less scary it's going to be. And the more it's going to engage our imagination in terms of how many different ways we can really benefit, create efficiencies, create revenue generating opportunities, etc. But then the other part of it is that 99% of time, even after the projects that we have done with different organizations, I get the question of validation, right? And, as somebody who can get very geeky about these algorithms, I'm like, oh, let me tell you about data validation. Let me tell you how much we worked on modelizers. And it's not that. It's about what they're trying to articulate is that how can I validate that it is actually useful? And again, we have to appreciate that there is, again, methodology, scientific methodology for doing that as well. And, and that's the part that the art and the science really can get entangled and just, to create beautiful results. Because if we actually design some of these experiments well enough, it is going to lead to more hypotheses. As in, the more the end users actually interact with these systems, whether it is generative AI, whether it is, just standard machine learning algorithms, etc., the more they're going to have questions. That is the definition of success. The more questions you have as a result of interacting with the system, the more hypotheses you build. it basically means, okay, there are some additional things that the model now can learn from, etc. You can create these feedback loops. And I mean, again, there are architectures for that. And these are some of the stuff that at Amii people do a lot of research, like the reinforcement learning architectures. There are things that, again, the interaction of humans with the machine, how we build these structures for these systems to continuously learn. These are all very important topics.
I want to jump in quickly, Junaid, on a couple of key points that Cam, Rogayeh, and Marc called out, which is, I love there's like, hey, have your sort of threshold on what's the % of accuracy you can have, which will then feed what kind of data sets you need. And maybe this is going to be subtly different between a small organization and a large, which is when you do the experiments and go through it, you'll also kind of have, okay, like, is this an acceptable outcome, and some of the training, and do we need a full framework or not? And that subtle difference is really that when you do that experiment, you know, you need to have some baseline metrics. So I was working with an organization that wanted to use some of the AI capabilities to make their developers more productive, productivity being sort of the key outcome that's desired. What's interesting is they said, well, we're not going to get into a heavy business value ROI exercise because we don't have the basic metrics today. We don't measure the lines of throughput a developer creates, et cetera. So what am I going to build my ROI based off, right? Like, we don't have a base measurement today. But guess what? I threw it into the hands of 30 developers. They loved it. I have enough anecdotal productive outcomes and verbatim from them that I'm going to expand it and roll it out to another 500 developers. Like, that's all that the fancy ROI exercise was. And so it really depends. Meanwhile, I have a client who wants to auto-generate some customer emails. That's a much more involved process. They're looking for 96% accuracy, no different than if you were to call a rep up today. And sometimes the rep, you know, maybe due to lack of training or misinformation, might give you the wrong information. You get transferred, call back and say, hey, your first rep had kind of given me this. That same kind of translates even into auto-generated AI responses. So the other thing I'd say is we have fear of the accuracy has to be really, really high. But if it's just mimicking human experience, actually, it's no different. We're just automating the delivery medium, right?
Yeah, great point. Great point. Want to jump in some questions that the audience has. Question number one is, what is the most common fear with AI, and how can businesses or perhaps government regulations help ease the public's concern?
I can jump
Yeah,
in
jump
with
in.
that one.
Go for it, Rogayeh.
I'll tell you a story, and then Noureen, I'll pass it to you. I travel about 20-25 days a month, and I stay in a lot of hotel rooms. And you know, the hotels that I go in, cities that I'm most often with, you know, people, the staff, they know me well, they know what I do. So a couple of weeks ago, I got this question from a manager of one of the hotels that I was staying at. It's like, I have 2 kids. Are they going to be able to have a job? Like, literally, that was his question to me. So, you know, I think the fear of our jobs being, or, you know, a set of jobs, a class of like different kind of jobs being lost to AI, I think that's one of the things that, you know, I keep hearing. And, you know, here's a funny anecdote for it. And I don't know, Noureen, you want to talk about it more. So how about I just, you know, put it out there, you can respond to it.
No, I love it. It's a perfect set of Rogayeh. So yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. Is AI is not gonna replace humans, but rather it could replace the humans that don't adapt to AI and find a way to embrace it. And I have an 8-year-old, and someone said, well, being a data and AI woman, like, what do you pass on to your kid? And I'm like, actually, I don't have any technical classes yet and things like that. I just want him to be an adaptable, growing person. The more change he can process through without getting frustrated and throwing a tantrum, the better future AI user he's gonna be. And that's the only, if he can understand change is constant, he'll do well in an AI world, right? And I'd say that's really the basic. And then to your point, what can governments, regulations do? I think it should be like an absolute, the education system should have it as a mandatory to get AI education. I know tons of organizations like IBM, Microsoft, even the big consulting firms have put out AI Academy, AI training sessions. Everyone should just, as a must, I don't care if you're a grandma or you're like a 3-year-old, go through that AI training.
Just imagine a 3-year-old on YouTube just watching the sessions go by. Okay. Question number 2.
Can I tell you the response that I gave to the hotel manager now? Now
Yes.
that Noureen set it up.
Yes, please.
You know, I think the thing that I told the guy was, so our company, we are a small group. We're about 30 people, but half the company has PhDs. The ones that don't have PhD have triple masters, right? Like we're a very specialized team. And guess what kind of interns we are accepting in the company? High school. We've had a couple of girls, couple of boys, high school students. They have literally built models that then, like the rest of my team to kind of scale it. And, like they are like, I think they are just a little bit underestimating, what the younger generations are actually exposed to and the kind of technology that they are growing up with. At least like I'm not worried about that generation's job, but I do agree with Noureen that like, the rest of us, we really have to educate ourselves because it's that's going to create differentiation.
Yeah. Marc, any comments?
I mean, it's the most sensitive of discussions, I think. The fear is very real. Let me take one step back. When we talk to clients and they're thinking about, strategically, there's the whole list of fears they have around, like, what does it mean in terms of the shape of my organization, the things I need to be considering from a risk point of view, et cetera, right? For the users, I think the employment fears are very real and they're quite well founded. I think we're in this period of extreme change, and it's accelerating so quickly. I think is the thing that's hard to understand, or hard to kind of wrap our minds around. I consider myself a self-professed techno-optimist, so I do think that generally speaking, humans are incredibly adaptive. We need to think very carefully about what our kids are going to be learning. So I've got, similar to Noureen, I've got a 3-year-old. I think about this stuff all the time. What do they need to be learning in schools? So what is the model of education, and how does that need to adapt in this world? I tell the story all the time. Again, super dating myself, but I can remember being in elementary school when pocket calculators became a thing, and my elementary school teacher saying, "Well, like, okay, forget learning your multiplication tables because everyone's going to have a calculator, and you're all going to be able to do math, right? So like mental math was no longer a thing all of a sudden, like overnight, right?" So imagine all of our professional work being impacted by AI in terms of our ability to do more, to reason. The tools, and I'm talking now specifically about generative AI, are going to be in the hands of every user. So anybody who's got that sits with a laptop, right? Whether it's Google, Microsoft, whatever, all those tools are going to be embedded. So it's going to impact our work in significant ways. That's going to have knock-on impacts. So we're going to have to rethink what kids are going to have to learn, what skills they're going to be equipped with, right? We're going to have to lean into our humanity in terms of what we bring that's unique in a world where like intelligence is widely distributed at a very, very high level. So I think it's going to be very, very transformative. That said, I do think the reason I referenced the techno-optimist piece is that humans are incredibly adaptable. We can't even imagine the things that we're unleashing 8 billion people upon this technology. So that means that people are going to come up with new models, new ways to create value. That's going to propagate around the world. So I do think net it's going to be extremely positive. But I think if we're sitting in a conversation where we're saying, well, it's really not going to be that disruptive, it's really not going to be that significant, I think we're probably missing the boat. And actually, it's incumbent upon the practitioners of it to be thinking very thoughtfully about what that means and how to meaningfully and thoughtfully be part of that change. It is unfortunate, I think, some of you can't regulate. So the question underneath the question is like, can we regulate it? Can we tamp the brakes somewhat? To me, it feels very much like the horse has left the barn. And so really it's about how do you embrace that change, and one of the things that we talk a lot about is the idea that it's really important to have a sense of agency in the story, meaning that the people who are interacting with the technology, the people that are building the technology, the researchers like Cam's group, et cetera, right? All these market participants are thinking very carefully about being a player in that story and not just passively receiving the impacts of it, right? And so I think that's a big part of the story, is that we're not just passive consumers of the technology, but actually that we have agency in the way that it rolls out and the way that we think about how it propagates inside our organizations and the type of work that we do.
Yeah, I'm like seeing a lot of questions coming in about like young adults and the education and training they need for the world that they're looking to enter. And I'm very similar to you in terms of being a technical optimist. I very much agree that this is something we should be embracing. I'm a big advocate for like open source AI models. I've like seen some of the things that they can do and like the personality they bring to them. Like for example, I saw this a friend of mine built this robot that you could talk to and would need to convince through empathy to buy you a pizza. And like the idea to be able to see empathy from an AI system is just wild to me. And I think the youth is able to like build these like models and systems that are like considering abstract things like empathy that like we don't really think about in terms of like a business model. So I am optimistic about what's about to come. Yeah. Just for a time sake, I'm gonna jump into the next question. Is there a go-to set of responsible AI standards everyone should point to as a base or foundational set of practices in the AI environment?
Junaid, I can go into it if you want a little bit.
Yeah.
My first thing will be if you just go out and kind of, choose your favorite search engine and put in principles of AI or ethics. Everyone's got a framework. Someone's got 5, someone's got 6, someone's got 8. So that's just the first one, right? And then so I encourage that as an exercise, because what you can do is then glean from all of those and sort of take what most resonates with you. But if I were to categorize what all of them have very similar, it's sort of accountability. How are we going to establish a culture and mechanisms that provide some sort of oversight to enable humans to be accountable and have some, not control, but accountability to, again, what the system produces. How does it make us productive? How does it help us? Is it reliable? Is it inclusive? Fairness, right? That's a huge one. Diversity. And diversity, interestingly, it's not just, oh, we're going to be checking answers if they're fair and diverse, but it actually starts with the teams that are on your governance or review board for your AI projects. Are they diverse? Do they actually have members of diversity? So hopefully your organization has solved diversity as an organization hiring practice, and then think about, you want to bring all those people as a subset into the AI governance project team, then, if you will, so that they're people of different genders, different orientations, different ages, different cultural backgrounds, etc., that can then really help assess your AI project from that standpoint. The other one that's huge is transparency. So when you have outputs, well, how did we arrive there? So that's really necessary. How did, if someone wanted to question, could we peel open and take a look at the models behind to see how, what algorithm and what decision points are being made to get to it. And then I'd say you can kind of layer in what are the big problems, if you will, as us that we're facing as humanity. And so sustainability, right? And so how, if you have a gigantic AI model project that is running tons of compute program and is not producing an ROI, but is maybe perhaps not the most sustainable model, you might want to debate that it might not be part of your ROI, but sustainability is a measure that you have to be cognizant of, just as general, all of us as population. So those are some governing principles. And again, you'll find, I guess, traces of them through anyone's formal framework, if you look at it.
Junaid, can I jump in with 2 points, Noureen? I totally agree with a lot of things that you're talking about, but this is like, it's not definitely a disagreement, but perhaps complementing what you're sharing. When we're talking about the diversity, I agree with you. Again, basics has to be in place in any organizations. And today's International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day to everybody. But beside that, you have a diverse board, you have a diverse group of people who are in charge of actually governing and assessing your AI models. Well, guess what? Bias in a model starts way earlier in the pipeline. It starts with a data engineer who's been trained in physics or who's been trained in computer science. They are not trained, being an economist here, but also having training as a physicist. A physicist or a computer scientist does not necessarily get trained to actually ask some questions that would lead to identifying some of biases early on in a model. So, and and again, there exists methodology. I remember I got asked this question a while ago at a different panel, and I just basically said, here's it is, being the only economist in the room, there exists methodology to actually identify bias and take bias out of data and out of models. Even if we don't manage to successfully do that through the training of the models, etc., that's another reason why we would go and have hypotheses and build experiments. So, let's assume that we have a model that maybe we have an intuition that this model might be biased. Well, you go run an experiment. In the experiment, you have to properly randomize. If you're going to take a sample, it has to be properly randomized, which basically means if the result of the experiment versus the predictions from the model are not matching, or they're like, these again gonna give you indications. So to me, as much as it is important to have proper elements in an organization or a committee that is assessing the AI models, we really have to bring the attention back to the very beginning of that pipeline.
Absolutely, Rogayeh. I would agree. I mean, I think the inverse is we could go and work with an organization and say, here's a fancy questionnaire, your board must check that. But that doesn't mean the people that are on that AI committee are properly incentivized or trained to look for bias. And it might just be a checkbook exercise. Yes, we vetted it against test A and B. We're done. The data is fair. Meanwhile, it to your point, could still have biases. So it does require a bit more thought. And this is one area I could adds to the fear of AI. Well, we might as well just not do it then if it's going to be so complicated. And this is, again, like, take it in baby steps. It's okay. You can find one bias today and another one in another iteration and still roll it out through experimentation. You don't have to come up with all of these biases from the get-go.
Yeah. All right. As we come near the end, I would love to hear one takeaway from each one of you that businesses and like people moving into, young adults, etc., moving into this business space can take away and start applying today as they explore their journey with AI.
I remember, Marc, as you were talking about and giving the example of calculator, I just remembered how my 8-year-old self hated calculators. I would fight with I never would take a calculator to an exam. And, because for me, it was so important to be able to solve the problem and understand the problem. Anyways, I was a weird kid. But I think the takeaway for me, as I'm thinking about, young adults, especially, really brilliant researchers that we end up hiring directly out of academia and or high school or undergrad students that we take as interns. I think it is really important to actually understand the fundamental science behind the stuff that we are building. The technology is going to be very accessible. Cannot agree more with Marc. It's going to truly transform everything that we do. But the more we actually train some of these young adults, at least have natural interest towards some of these things to truly understand the fundamental science behind it, the richer and the more safe tools and systems we are going to be able to build.
Cam, I'll kick it over to you. What's your takeaway?
Yeah, I think when you look at the panel, probably the reason this panel was put together is a lot of businesses are asking a lot of questions and they know they need to be in this area, and it feels like a lot. And to be honest, I think we might have piled more on everybody today. Here's a couple things. Like, the first is, and like, as a born and bred Canadian, like, we can't miss this. We helped create it. Like, we led the field and created this area. We can't miss this opportunity. And right now, as a point of data, 14% of US companies are actively using AI, and 4% of Canadian companies are actively using AI. And there's a K-shaped thing that happens when in any technology shift like this, especially machine learning, because it's a data enabled one, where the companies that invest early get a little bit of a data lead. They get a little bit more customers they get a little bit of a product lead. They get a few more customers because of it. They get a better data lead. They get more productivity, and that compounds really, really quickly. And the companies that don't, it goes the other direction. They have a little bit less data. Their product's a little bit worse. And what feels like a tiny thing right up the bat is a really big insurmountable lead really quickly. And as a country with productivity challenges, that's something that we can't allow to happen. We can't keep doing the thing of seeing what our US neighbors do, waiting a year or 2 years, and then being the ones to pick it up. And we have everything here because we were the ones who created it. So the talent, the opportunity in the area is all here. So the really, really big takeaway I would say for everyone is, whether it's responsible AI, whether it's, any of these things that feel like they're really insurmountable, to get going, because there's so many things, is just quickly start with AI literacy. Noureen talked about that earlier. Everybody should be getting a base level understanding. And then the second thing is, the most important thing you can do is actually getting going, because you're going to start to learn more things along the way. You're going to start to learn what areas are you have challenges in. You're going to start to learn where there's big areas of opportunity, but getting going and not waiting to see what your competitors or everybody else is going to do. I think that is the biggest takeaway, the biggest thing I hope everybody thinks about coming out of this is get the base level of understanding and get going now, because otherwise, like, the gap will grow really quickly.
I love it, Cam. Dropping the challenge. Like, let's get going. Like, enough sitting around. Let's do this thing. Yep, love it. All right, Noureen. Tough act.
Well, if Cam's stream has come alive and everybody's gone and gotten their AI basics down and packed and adopted and started using it, I'll add the next step then is really think about how AI elevates you, right? And I'll give an example. I know we've talked about calculators, but having an 80-year-old, I kind of think about in a world of self-driving cars, he may not need to, when he turns 16, get a driver's license. Like, it might be a moot point. Like, why do I get a driver's license, Mom? Because there's a car that's going to drive me around, right? And so then it's about elevating. What is he going to do during that time? Is he going to be using it for some educational studies on the road or whatever? And we've done this when the mobile phones came in. We found flexible work as an arrangement. So really start thinking about, once you get your AI foundations, get your hands on it, get your hands dirty with it, how is it going to elevate me? Again, it's not about replacement, but what does it free up my time? If my starting content creation time, or, I saw this post the other day where if someone has a writer's block, they kind of generate some stuff to get their block unblocked. And so they've just saved up a bunch of time and gone on to their next project. So really, how does it elevate and make you more productive and efficient and get you to pull insights and different, maybe it shortens your research time or pulls data together, or you really start thinking about, to Rogayeh's point, what are those important questions you're going to ask the data so that the AI can bring it back to you. So the AI is not generating any questions. We still have to ask the right questions and important ones to generate some sort of an outcome or value. And so that's the next, if you could have one takeaway once you get your basics, is how do I use AI to elevate myself?
I love all this stuff. My co-panelists here have done an amazing job. Be curious. I think that's the big call to action for me. I can tell you my childhood phone number like that. I would struggle to tell you my wife's phone number. Why? Because we've gotten dumb with technology, right? And I think a lot of this stuff, it runs antithetical to how we've come to think about technology as a thing that takes some cognitive load off of us. These tools are amazing. The technology is amazing, but you need to be super curious about what it can do, both as an organization and as an individual. Easy to get into, take the generative AI example, easy to get into the tool, put a basic prompt in, get an average response back and go, that's not very useful to me, and just forget about it. In this era, you have to get in and get your hands dirty. And that's the call to action for enterprises. Demystifying AI, start somewhere. Start slow if you have to, but start somewhere, experiment. You're going to learn. To Rogayeh's point, you're going to learn, you're going to understand where you need to go next, but you need to get started. So it's not something you can sit on the sidelines for. Echo all the great points of the panelists today. Get going, see where you need to go next, and just start on the journey. That's the call. That's the call to action for everyone listening today. So thanks very much.
Great. I just want to thank you all for joining us. I know this is a live audience, so I'll give you guys all the clap. There you go. And I'll kick it over to the team.
Great, thank you. So I just want to thank the speakers for joining us today. We'd like to thank our session sponsor, DXC Technology, presenting sponsor RBC, and our catalyst sponsor, Van City, for supporting Rising Economy 2024 in partnership with Pacifican. We also want to thank the attendees for attending. We encourage you to head back to the Whova platform to continue the conversation. There, you can check out the event agenda and upcoming sessions, head to the community section to check out the exhibitor booths, and join virtual meetups to engage in discussions. As well, the more you engage with the platform, the more points you earn, which increases your chance of winning one of our prizes, which includes small business gift certificates and books by our keynote speakers. Make sure you check out your score on the ABS leaderboard throughout the event, and stay tuned for the panel up next, ESG for small and mid-sized businesses. Thank you and goodbye.
Take care, guys.